students, welcome back to the geography series. In my last episode, I have discussed about the resources and environment interface. The interrelationships between resources and environment were brought into notice. The various environmental challenges facing by the mankind were also discussed. The important aspects of the environment is that due to continuous extraction of resources, environmental degradation has occurred and that has adversely affected the poor who depend upon the resources of their immediate surroundings. Dear students, in this module, we are going to discuss about the classification of resources. The topic is classification of resources, renewable and non-renewable, biotic, forests, wildlife, livestock, fisheries, agricultural crops and abiotic resources, that is land, water and minerals will be discussed. This episode consists of following modules. 1. Classification of resources. 2nd. Renewable resources. 3rd. Non-renewable resources. 4th. Biotic resources. 5th. Abiotic resources. Let us begin with the classification of resources. Natural resources are derived from the environment. Many of them are essential for our survival, while others are used for satisfying our wants. Natural resources, in a narrow sense, are those uncaptured natural stores which are useful to mankind in any way. They are most commonly grouped as waters, soils, forests, grasslands, wild animals and minerals. Insofar as they constitute collectively one of the factors of production, the economist speaks of them as land. Natural resources may be further classified in different ways. When they are manipulated by human powers, which in turn are aided by tools and other operating devices, three factors, that is land, labor and capital, swing into action and what the economist calls production gets going. Forests become settlements, railroad network ties relationship with fuel, paper, grassland become the source of meat and leather, water become used for drinking, cooking, cleaning and transporting and make up an important part of the volume of many useful articles. Minerals become household fertilizer, automobiles and jet planes. Resources can be mainly classified on the basis of renewability, origin, utility, ownership and development. The 5 groups mentioned above may well be arranged for the convenience and they might line up this way. 1. Renewable resources. On the basis of renewability, resources are classified into renewable and non-renewable resources. The first one is renewable resources. These resources are used over and over as their flow in nature. The perpetual of these dynamic resources are dependent upon proper planning and management. They include water, soil, fertility, forest, wild animals, human beings, etc. Renewable resources are those that can be replenished or reproduced easily. Some of them, like sunlight, air, wind, etc., are continuously available and their quantity is not affected by human consumption. Many renewable resources can be depleted by human use but may also be replenished, thus maintaining a flow. Water in its cycle begins with rainfall, runoff, circulating groundwater, Rivers, lakes, oceans and atmospheric moisture constitute an inexhaustible supply of water. Soils are indispensable to life. They are replaced very slowly in nature, but to some extent can be rebuilt and maintained in quality and fertility by human efforts. It is maintainable rather than replaceable, therefore more accurately characterized as renewable resources. Forests, if left in their natural state, are helped out by good management. Forests usually renew themselves. Some of these, like agricultural crops, take a short time for renewal. Others, like water, take a comparatively longer time, while still others, like forests, take even longer. Almost every form of animal life is subject to capture or control by man. By protecting the animal world, man can renew the animal resources. The second one, non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources are formed over very long geological periods. Minerals and fossils are included in this category. Since the rate of formation is extremely slow, they cannot be replenished once they are depleted. Out of these, the metallic minerals can be reused by recycling them, but coal and petroleum cannot be recycled. These are finite in nature and their exploitation lead to exhaustion of supplies. There is no hope for replacement of the materials. They include minerals, fossil fuels, species of wildlife, etc. However, the forests and soil, if left to nature, are renewable, but if used carelessly, they can be destroyed due to deforestation and soil erosion. The natural resources conservation started mainly for the non-renewable resources. The second classification I am going to discuss now is classification based on origin. Based on its origin, resources are classified into biotic resources and abiotic resources. Biotic resources are those obtained from the biosphere. Forests and their products, animals, birds and their products, fish and other marine organisms are important examples. Minerals such as coal and petroleum are also included in this category because they were formed from decayed organic matter. Now, abiotic components. In biotic resources, let us begin with forest. Forests are the most extensive and complex, biologically productive of all the ecosystems on this planet. They have been used by the mankind since the earliest times, but in recent years, their overuse has led to a serious deforestation problem. Forests are invaluable property of a region because they provide raw materials to modern industries, timber for building purpose, habitats for numerous types of animals and microorganisms. Good, friable and nutrient-rich soils having high organic content offer protection to soils by binding the soils through the network of their roots and by protecting the soils from direct impact of falling raindrops. They encourage and increase infiltration of rainwater and thus allow maximum recharge of groundwater resources, minimizes surface runoff and hence reduce the frequency, intensity and dimension of floods. They help in increasing the precipitation. They are natural sink of carbon dioxide because they use carbon dioxide to prepare their food during the process of photosynthesis. Forests provide firewood to millions of people all over the world and food and shelter to innumerable humans and animals. In fact, forests are lifeline of a region because prosperity and welfare of the society directly depends on sound and healthy forest cover. Forests are main component of the biotic resources of the natural environmental system, and the stability of the environment and ecosystem. Ecological balance largely depend on the status of the forests of the region. A forest is generally defined as a plant community predominantly comprised of trees and other woody vegetation. Food and Agricultural Organization of United Nations defines forest as land with a tree canopy of more than 10% and area of more than 0.5 hectares. Forest is determined not only by the presence of trees but also the absence of other predominant land uses. Forests have truly multiple functions. Forests are the homes of a great diversity of species of plants, animals and other organisms. Many agricultural plants and domesticated animal species originate in wild relatives which still inhabit forest lands. Many species in forests provide people with food, timber, fuel wood, medicine, various other raw materials for industry and fodder for animals. In addition to these direct socio-economic inputs, forests and forest land perform a variety of complex ecological services such as oxygen production, carbon dioxide, fluxation, minerals and water cycle, soil and water production, climate regulation and so on. Forests are vital life support system. They create conditions necessary for life by cycling of gases and water between air and soil. Forest services also include recycling water, protection of water and soil resources. The second important biotic resources are fisheries. Fishing is the harvesting of fish and other marine animals from the oceans and inland waters to provide food for humans. Fish can be processed to make fish meal and to make oils, glues, fertilizers and drugs. From the earliest times, fishing has been one of the humanity's most important means of feeding itself. Spears, lines and nets were used to catch fish, at first by fishermen standing at the edges of the water. Gradually, the use of boats allowed fishing to move into deeper waters, a trend that has continued up to the present day. The present annual marine catch totals about 76 million tons. More than 75% of this total is caught in the northern hemisphere, despite the fact that 90% of the surface of the southern hemisphere is covered with water. Traditionally, fishing has been concentrated on the continental shelves where the shallow water receives sufficient sunshine and nutrient washed in by rivers to support large amount of plankton, the tiny plants and animals that provide the main source of food for fish. Fish as a source of food. Fish and other marine animals, particularly lobsters, crabs, shrimps, prawns and krills and others supply humans on an average with about 15% of their protein. Livestock. Livestock farming is concerned with the rearing of animals for their meat products, dairy products, hides, skins, wool, glue and gluten. The term pastoralism is also used for this branch of agriculture, although technically it does not include the intensive indoor rearing of animals such as pigs and chickens. Meat and meat products are used for both human and animal consumption. Dairy products are based on milk, usually from cows, but also from goats and sheep, and include butter, cream, cheese and yogurt. Hides and skins are mostly used for clothing and footwear. usually in the form of leather. Wool shed from the animal annually is spun into yarn and then woven or netted into garments. Sheep are the main producers, but goats, camels, others are also important. Today, all forms of livestock farming can still be found around the world. The important domesticated animals are cattle, pigs, sheep, horses, asses, mules, goats, camels, water buffaloes, and poultry. Next, let us discuss about the agricultural crops. The term agriculture is used to describe all man's activities that are dependent upon the soil. It includes growing of crops and the raising of livestock. It is the chief occupation of man, for nearly two-thirds of the labor force of the world today is directly engaged in it. Climate, soil and topography are the important geographical factors which influence agriculture. The chief agricultural produce may be divided into two groups: food crops and commercial crops. Food crops include rice, wheat, maize, millets, oats, spices, fruits, etc. Commercial crops such as cotton, jute, tobacco, rubber, oilseed, coffee, etc. Next important biotic component is wildlife. Wildlife includes all non-domesticated plants, animals and other organisms or animals living in their natural environment. These are called wildlife. The term wildlife refers to all the plants and animals on the planet that are not domesticated by the mankind. Among the world's wildlife, there are many endangered species of both plants and animals. Wildlife can be found in all ecosystems. Deserts, rainforests, plains and other areas, including the most developed urban sites, all have distinct forms of wildlife, while the term in popular culture usually refers to animals that are untouched by human factors. Religions have often declared certain animals to be sacred, and in modern times, concern for the natural environment has provoked activists to protest the exploitation of wildlife for human benefit or entertainment. Some people engage in viewing exotic wildlife as tourists. For example, Africa is a popular travel destination for going on a safari. Protecting wildlife is very important to the future of the environment, and there are many wildlife organizations devoted to that protection. Next important component is land. The land is an important component of the biosphere. The lithospheric component consists of elements, minerals, rocks, micro landforms and meso landforms. Then the lithosphere accounts for about 29% of the total surface area of the globe. Water. Water is very important component of the abiotic or physical components because it is very essential element for all types of life in the biosphere, because without water no life is possible on the planet Earth. The water component consists of surface water, groundwater and oceanic water. 97% of the world's water supply is from the oceanic source. Minerals. Minerals are important constituents of the soil zone because they help in the formation of soil. Minerals are included in the category of inorganic matter of the soils. It may be stated that soils are formed due to weathering of parent rocks, but it is not always necessary that the mineral composition of a particular soil resting over a parent rock. The important minerals of the soil zone are olivine, augite, hornblende, biotite, potash, feldspar, muscovite and quartz. Let me conclude my episode like this. As we all know, environment is essentially a problem to be comprehended and the concern for environmental quality should be internalized by every individual. Learning the environment is only a part of the above dimension. More important than the learning, the students must be sensitized and be made conscious of the need for maintaining the environmental quality for the benefit of our posterity. Environmental quality has to become a way of life. Abiotic resources comprises of non-living things. Example, land, water, air and minerals such as gold, iron, copper, silver, etc. Now the third classification of resources are on utility. On the basis of utility, resources are classified into energy resources. Energy is the primary and most universal measures of all kinds of work by human beings and nature. Everything what happens in the world is the expression of flow of energy in one of its form. The energy sources can be divided into two types, conventional and non-conventional energy sources. Conventional sources are exhaustible, example coal and petroleum. Non-conventional energy sources are solar energy and wind energy. The second is raw material resources. For industries, raw materials are the main source. For iron and steel industry, iron ore, manganese, coal is important raw materials. Classification based on ownership. Individual properties and characteristics are the individual resources. Community resources owned by, it's a owned resources. Example, cultural and religious dogma are the community owned resources. National resources which is confined to national boundaries, example, lands and minerals. International resources shared by all inhabitants of the earth, that is, example is air. The next classification is classification on development. On the basis of development, resources are classified as potential resources, developed resources, stock and reserves. On the basis of the stage of development, natural resources may be called potential resources. Potential resources are those that exist in a region and may be used in the future. For example, mineral, oil may exist in many parts of India having sedimentary rocks, but till the time it is actually drilled out and put into use, it remains as potential resource. The next is developed resource. Developed resource are those that have been surveyed, their quantity and quality is determined and are being used in present times. For example, petroleum and natural gas obtained from the Bombay high fields.